Richard Jefferson, who was a former teammate of Tim Duncan, said recently he's talked trash to Tim about how Tim wouldn't be able to handle Jokic. Tim's response to Richard was, I played him after I was me and before he was him, and I did okay. This is what Richard Jefferson claims Tim Duncan said. So here's what I had to say about this is that during Jokic's rookie year, the first time he caught my attention was when the Spurs were playing the Nuggets. I'm a Spurs fan, so obviously I follow a lot of their games. I was watching the Nuggets game. It was earlier in the season, and Jokic actually stood out to me in that game. He scored over 20-some points. He was very crafty, and I was thinking during that game, like, wow, this guy could be a solid NBA player. He looks like he's going to be a solid NBA player. Obviously, I could not tell that he was going to become a league MVP one day, NBA superstar, a future Hall of Famer. But just by watching that game, I could tell he was going to be a solid player. He was very crafty and was able to get some easy buckets. I was impressed by him. Tim had a solid game, and the Spurs, for most of that game, were blowing the Nuggets out. The box score makes it look closer than what it was. I believe the Spurs were up by 20 at one point in time in the game. It was a very easy game. I didn't see their final meeting where Duncan clearly outplayed him, got 21 points, while Jokic struggled and had 8 points on 3 for 9 shooting. This was like at the end of the year, I believe, second to last game of the season, where Tim outplayed him. It's only interesting because Tim's knees were very bad that year. He was literally playing on no knees. Both his knees were just done, and we would see that, unfortunately, during the playoffs where he looked completely washed up, I would say. So this was kind of like one of Tim's last remaining games where he looked like a legit NBA player before he fell apart. Now, with that being said, I would say a matchup between prime Duncan and prime Jokic would have been a lot of fun. Here's where Jokic is better than Tim at. Here's the skills I would say he's better at. Jokic is a great passer compared to Tim. Tim was a good passer, but Jokic is just on another level. I would say Jokic's jump shot is better than Tim's. Tim had a good mid-range, but Jokic jump shot is on another level. Not only can he hit the mid-range consistently, he can also hit threes. Tim never could shoot the three ball. So I would say he's better than Tim in those areas for sure. Just there's no competition when it comes to shooting and passing. He's ahead of Tim. But I would say Duncan is ahead of him when it comes to defense. Duncan's defense, to me, was elite. I don't think there's very few NBA big men who can compare to Duncan's defense because Duncan had great lateral movement. He was really great at guarding the pick and roll. I've never seen a big man that was able to guard the pick and roll as effectively like Duncan could do. He was just great at stopping picks and making it very hard for teams to execute that simple play against the Spurs. On top of that, he was great at switching. He was great at rotating. He was just great at making those rotations, just on another level, I would say. There's even a highlight mix of when he was 40 years old, making great defensive plays. There's just one play where he's in the right spot, right as Russell Westbrook is going to go for a dunk, I believe, and he just swats him, and he's not even jumping off the ground. Just the timing is just amazing. He knew exactly where Westbrook was going to go before Westbrook got there and was able to position himself. So that shows you how Tim had a ridiculous IQ in the defensive end. Jokic, when he first entered the league, was a terrible defensive player. Just god awful, I would say. He's gotten a lot better now, where I feel he's a average defender, where it's not bad as it was before, where he can be decent and he can be useful, where teams can't fully take advantage of his weakness on the defensive end. But Tim was miles ahead of Jokic in that regard, just defensively. I would say Tim's lateral movements were greater than Jokic. Jokic laterally is not as quick as Tim was. Tim in his prime was just so fast laterally. Just one of the best big men when it came to lateral movement. I would say Tim was much more athletic than Jokic when he was in his prime. Now, when it comes to strength, both are pretty strong, I would say, obviously. I think Tim's strength was deceptive because, in my eyes at least, when I watched the games, Tim when he was guarding Shaq was out of this world amazing. He did the best job defensively I've ever seen a big man do guarding Shaq. Shaq had some of his worst career numbers whenever he was guarded by Tim. Tim was able to hold him below his career scoring averages. If you don't believe me, you can check the stats. It was just incredible to watch, and I feel like Shaq was the strongest player in the league at that time, and maybe the strongest in history. The only guy that can make an argument, I feel, is Wilt Chamberlain. And Tim was just ridiculous at guarding Shaq. He could get him out of position. He could really make it hard for Shaq to get into the spots he wanted to. Very few players had that ridiculous strength to battle Shaq. And that's why I believe Tim would be able to effectively guard Jokic. Jokic is strong, but Tim wouldn't be intimidated because he's already got up against Shaq, so I don't see how Tim would melt against him. I would say the other thing that would give Tim a huge advantage against Jokic is his great footwork. Tim's great footwork was out of this world, I felt. Just best footwork I've seen. Up there with Olajuwon, Mikhail. Maybe you can make the argument Olajuwon was better at footwork, but Tim was up there, just elite. Not to say that Jokic is bad, but I think that would have given Tim an advantage against Jokic. For sure, I don't think Jokic would have been able to guard him effectively, simply because his footwork would have been too much for Jokic to keep up with him. Now, Jokic would also get his against Tim. I'm not going to say that Tim's going to shut him down and hold him to 2 points. He's still probably going to get his 20, but it's going to be a hard 20 because Tim's defense was elite. Obviously, Jokic will still get his assists, but it would be very hard, I think, for Jokic to straight up dominate Tim every game. And I think it would just be competitive on both ends. Just a very entertaining matchup I would love to see. Obviously, we'll never get to see it, but I think it would have been very competitive. Both guys have high IQ, I would say. Out of this world. And they're both guys who are willing to do whatever it takes to win, in the sense that they don't care about stats. I feel Tim would be happy if his team could win, and even if he had 2 points, he would still be happy about it. I think Jokic is the same. So both guys would be going for the win, in my eyes at least. That's all I have to say about that.